So today we're welcoming Ryan Phelan, Managing Partner at RPEOrigin, and Phil Davis, Chief Business Officer from AtData. The focus of today's discussion is the importance of developing a data-driven campaign strategy and what marketers should be focusing on in 2023. So Phil, would love if you would start off the introductions today.
Sure. Well, good afternoon. Most of you, I believe, are in good afternoon. For those of you not, good morning. And I'm real excited to be here today to share our thoughts and also to, share a conversation with Ryan. We've worked together in this industry for many years. We've both been in the industry over 20, but we've probably spent maybe 12 together. So I'm excited to be able to share the conversation. A little bit, it's the only time we're going to do any selling. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what AtData does in case you're not sure, but we help our clients accelerate their digital marketing and maximize the value of their first-party data. So we're a team of email experts, and what we do is we clean and verify emails, connect identities, and we foster better engagement and re-engagement. And I'm excited to talk about a topic that I'm passionate about. And let's let Ryan introduce himself cool. So that he has a chance to get this going.
Cool. Thanks, Phil. Just so happy and honored to be here. Been friends with you and many of your co-workers at AtData for a long time, and just excited to share some information with everybody today and just have a good conversation. It's truly going to be a fireside chat where we're just kind of giving our thoughts and ideas on what's going on. So my momentary sales pitch, RPEOrigin is the only vendor agnostic end-to-end email agency in the space. We focus just on email, and we also partner with some fantastic partners in the space in terms of execution and RFP, but we are going to talk today about strategy and what we think the space needs to do in the next 12 months and use data, and we help our clients enable that as well. That's it.
Fantastic, and I will do a one pitch for you, Ryan. He does have a handout here. It's a one-pager describing his services. For those of you who are not familiar with RPEOrigin, please, take time to download that.
Thanks, Phil.
Awesome. Thank you both. So I'm going to kick things off for you with a quick question. I think it'll lead us into our conversation today pretty well. So you both were at EEC recently, Email Evolution Conference. What were some of the trends that you noticed during your time there?
Oh, gosh. Number one, it was a great show. It's so fantastic to be back in person and talking to people. A lot of the things that I saw, and Phil, I'm interested too in what you saw, but we saw a lot of and heard from a lot of people on marketing automation, about how to capture that intent by the consumer or react to something by the consumer, and how to really monetize that, how to make it work in the best way on an automated basis. We talked a lot about personalization, and really, what does that mean? Is it just like your first name, or what does personalization at scale look like? There were also a ton of different ideas about how to do things different, how to reinvent strategies, how to look at data differently. And for the first time in a long time, I heard a lot of discussion around just using data in a better way, recognizing that the proliferation of it in the space is so much more than it has been in probably the last 8 years. It's phenomenal to see people to layer that onto their campaigns, use it for intelligent strategies and really emails that benefit the consumer. Phil, what did you see?
Yeah, so a lot of those same themes certainly we saw. What was really interesting though is in past shows there was a lot of talk about creative. We spent a lot of time on content, and in this time we spent a lot of time on math. And it was really interesting. It was really like, how do I organize my data so I could be data driven? And then how do I measure results? So, on two ends of the spectrum of your campaign, the front end is, how am I having my data prepped to get as much as I can out of it and be smart? And then, test properly and pull the metrics to inform my data better and become smarter. And,
Yeah.
so there are a lot more programs around measurements than we've seen.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really interesting. The other theme that I thought was fascinating was the tools. When you think about the tools that we have at our disposal, we have better and more tools than we've ever had. And really, as an email marketer, when I talk to the email marketers, their struggle to use more of the tool. They bring in a great tool, they're bringing in the best in breed. They might have a great CDP, a CRM, a great platform for automation. And, they're acknowledging that they're lucky to use 30 to 40% of it. How do they use more of it wisely?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was super interesting. I think there are some challenges that came up, and things that we talked about from a challenge is just the general turnover in the industry from a marketer perspective. Marketers are moving out of jobs pretty rapidly, and so maybe that's why they're only using parts of the tool.
Yeah.
And the other thing we talked a lot about was the macroeconomic conditions and how is it going to inform what we do this year. So I thought those were kind of themes. I'll let you touch on some of those and maybe we can, swing back and forth a little.
No, would totally agree with that. I think going in kind of the order you were talking about, right? So from a platform capability standpoint, I think COVID really highlighted how much of a platform I'm not using or how much capabilities I don't have, right? And we see that in our RFP business is that people come and they're like, the platform stinks. And it's like, well, does it stink or are you using it the right way, right? And it used to be that, when I worked on the ESP side, something like 20% of the platform, to your point, you said 20 to 40% would be used, and it's about unlocking the rest of it. And yes, there was a ton of that discussion at the show, which is great to see people challenge themselves to make sure they're getting all they can out of it. The second, there was a lot of math, there was a lot of reporting, there was a lot of analysis and what do true numbers look like, right? And the ability of the email marketer to rise above just the generic reporting out of an ESP and take it to a level that's actually actionable, right? And then the third point is really conquering that churn in the industry. I've written about this before, and the power and the effectiveness of when you leave a job, especially in email, when you leave email, document, take care to pass along what you've learned. If you think about it, right? Somebody's been in the job 2-3 years, they've probably tested a whole bunch of stuff and tried this treatment and tried this cadence and tried all these things that generally will go undocumented. They leave and somebody new comes in and they start back at square one and they're like, oh, let me test this and this and this. And it's like, well, you've done that before, but you don't know. And that as an industry slows us down considerably. And that's where I think we need to pass along that for the advancements in the channel, but also to protect the person that's taken over for the job I have.
Absolutely. And I think that issue was highlighted through COVID. A lot of direct consumer brands shrunk and grew and shrunk. And I think we're seeing that again now due to the macroeconomic conditions. So, one of the conversations we were having with marketers was around those macroeconomic conditions. They're saying, gosh, consumer spending is down, cash is expensive. And so for D2C companies, there's some instability. And so you're an email marketer, what do you do in that environment? Like, how do you manage that environment? And there were probably 3 things that kept coming back was, focus on that existing customer, like really, and not just customer, but anyone in your CRM, but focusing on expanding the share of the wallet and expanding your relationship. And from an email marketer, improving your engagement and loyalty within that within that cluster of people. The other one is you got to maximize the value of the newly acquired customers. And you have great tools. In a lot of cases, what are email marketers doing to create a great first impression early on in the relationship so that they can, take that newly acquired customer and really engage with them out of the gate so they get a much better experience. And the lastly, and I think this goes kind of, with 1 and 2, you got to get more out of your first party data. So how do you maximize the value of your first party data? And I think that's really important. We talk a lot about also that connected consumer. They come in and we connect their identities. And you and I had this conversation about, omni-channel versus multi-channel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And why is it so important to connect the dots of the identity? And so, Ryan, why don't you talk a little bit about your thoughts around omni-channel versus multi-channel, why that's so important to think about it?
Yeah. So and I loved your question when we were chatting, which was which one do you prefer? Which one captures what we're trying to do? And it really is that omni-channel view, but it starts at acquisition, to your earlier point, right? The whole industry or practice of activation, right, has been this identifying the individual, but email has been doing that for a long time. When we get their email address, we've been doing onboarding series for a long time in email. Whether it's one email, a welcome, whether it's additional two, the goal is always twofold if you're doing it right. Number one, to welcome them in, but to educate them on the brand, the product, the mission, vision, and what the expectation is, both on their side and your side, right? But if you're doing it right, the right way to look at it is that's a perfect opportunity to learn more about your consumer, to ask questions, progressive profile. The consumer will answer those questions, especially if they're invested, and in the beginning of the relationship, they're invested. So how does that layer on? Well, if I have their email address and I'm able in the early stages to get their zip code, then I can have a higher match rate for third-party data or additional pieces of data to inform a strategy immediately, right? If I ask interest, if I ask something that's brand-centric. So by asking something innocuous as zip code, you increase your match rate exponentially. Now pair that with other information you have within your organization, how you put them into a persona group, whatever that is, right? But if you're immediately getting a higher availability of third-party data, then you can use that effectively, not creepy, but you can use that effectively downstream. And then you're off to the races, right? Then you're into a data-led strategy that is informed by not only your own data that you're tracking, but the stuff you're picking up that you don't know and they wouldn't disclose.
Absolutely. And certainly when we ever talk about omnichannel, we always talk about silos. And how you break down those silos. I actually think what's interesting is in data, we're talking about, CDPs and other things, which helps break down those silos. And I think we'll get to that in a little bit later.
Yeah.
But let's shift from EC and let's talk about what marketers should be focusing on in 2023.
Sure.
So you have a lot of clients that are coming to you right now and they need help with their campaigns overall. They want to help with their email program. But in general, 2023, where's the focus?
God, it's got to be data, right? I hate to keep saying it over and over again, but it's got to be data, right? And specifically data that's used to inform your emails that are going out, right? The rest of the web looks intelligent. The rest of the web, when you go to Yahoo, Google, when you go to anywhere, right? Amazon, I'm seeing what I've looked at before, what I could buy or what it wants me to buy, which is generally right. But it is an informed web. But so many times when we're getting emails in the inbox, it's an ignorant web. It's an ignorant experience because it's just one to many. And this is something we've been preaching for the last 20 plus years. Both Phil, me, a lot of people have been trying to get people to understand that the power of data in an active way in your email program can increase the money, the KPIs that you're already making, right? And it just takes that small step. And one of the things we're going to talk about later is this incremental innovation idea about where do you start? Everybody's scared to get to that. They see the use of data as this advanced kind of thing. It's not that scary.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. So when you talk about using data, at the end of the day, a lot of what we're falling back on is how do you create emails that are more engaging? And it goes back to personalization, right?
Yes.
And so what does personalization actually mean?
Yeah, and it's one of those words that I actually hate. I hate the word personalization.
Well, it scares people, right?
It does.
And so we don't want to paralyze our email marketers with personalization. But what I like to think about is a continuum of personalization. So
Yeah.
there's one-to-one where your email is unique to that individual. It talks uniquely to the individual. You're using a lot of data and an AI metrics to bring in, the right copy and the right image, and it's a rock and roll experience, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of us, you can't get there right away. Maybe right after you get an email, you don't have enough data to feed your AI engine, right? Maybe you don't have enough content, what have you. So there is stages. And the one thing that I would tell a marketer, we talk about this incremental improvement, is don't let perfection get in the way of getting way better.
Correct.
And you could get way better with smart segmenting, right? And testing those segments. So, we had a great piece at the EC on testing, but we've seen brands pick one field, use it well, and get tremendous improvement in their campaigns. And so, one of my favorite examples was a women's retail store. I met with their digital team, and they said to me, "Phil, email doesn't work for older women. It only works for young women." And I'm like, "Okay, let me see your program."
Right.
Well, the copy and the image they sent the same image and copy to every single person in their database, and every single person in their database got light copy, but an image of what looked like a 19-year-old model who maybe if she gained some weight would be a size 0, wearing work clothes for, that they were trying to sell to women of all ages to wear to work. And I looked at them, I said, "I'm not sure that you're speaking to your whole audience. Let's take age ranges and just use age appropriate images." And that's all they did. They just put age appropriate images, and their improvement, they had a 10x return on email sent by doing it. I mean, it was astronomical, one field.
Yeah, and that one field is so important to realize, right? I talk to a lot of marketers, and so do you, and you start talking about data enablement at scale, right? And everybody gets freaked out thinking that it's too much. I can't handle it. I can barely handle my thing. Similar story to you. I talked to a company, they had massive marketing automation, massive. I mean, it was just overwhelming. And I said, how did you do this? He said, I started with one, and he built it up. And so if you're out there thinking about data and using data, what you have to do is use it simply and push yourself to then do simply +1. Start to do something more the next time and more the next time. Don't just sit there and go, okay, I've reached the end of the internet or the end of where I can go. You actually need to keep moving yourself forward and drive yourself toward that data complexity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think then one of the challenges for some people is, wait, I got some critical data holes. I got gaps. I don't know how to grab my data. I've had clients say I've got big data holes, and then we spend some time with them, and they don't have big holes. They got little holes. They just don't know how to find their own data. So let's talk about you work with a lot of clients who come to you for this specific need. How do you go about filling some of these critical gaps in the data that they have?
Really, it starts with how are you going to use it? We always start with how do you want to use it? What's your concept? What's your vision? And then it goes to an inventory of what do you have? And then, so it's a lot of different communications, because a lot of times the email marketer thinks that they only have this set of data that comes from the CRM plus whatever email gets them. And many times in organizations, if we just ask around, people are buying data, people are getting data from third-party sources. It's just not available to the email marketer. So we want to take an inventory of everything the company has, pair that with need, and then we want to go get what's critical and what's missing if it's linked to a use, right? And so we'll go out to companies like AtData, and we'll go out and find that, and this isn't a commercial, this is just reality, right? We want to fill that hole because that has been identified as a critical mission item for whatever the project is. And so, but we start with the need. We don't start with, I just got to get a bunch of stuff.
Right. I always love to ask a marketer, if I could have one data field what would it be? And by the way, you need it at scale. So it can't be some
Yeah.
esoteric field that you can get for like 8 people. Because if you can
Right.
only do, you can only get like, you got 1 million people in your database, you only do something with 8 of them, it's not scalable.
Right.
So what's that one field that I could use that would do something interesting with my campaigns? And it's fascinating the answers you have. And certainly if you're in the audience, feel free to share what your one field is.
What would mine be?
We're always curious, but one of the things, I have 7 fields that I consider the holy grail of fields. If I have these 7 fields combined with the behavioral data that I pull, so someone comes to my site, they make a purchase. At that point, I know a fair amount. I know some behavioral data. I know what they were looking at. I know when they were looking at it. I know how long they were looking at it. And I know what they ultimately might have purchased, right? But I can't contextualize who this individual is because it just might be behavior that's specific to this point in time, right? But I'm not marketing them again at this point in time. I got to market them in another time. So could have been November. They just bought a bunch of Christmas gifts for their niece or nephew that they're never buying again until their birthday, right? So I can't make assumptions only on the behavior. So 7 fields to contextualize behavior: age, gender, location, marital status, presence of children, homeowner status, and income. If you give me those 7 fields early on, I can make a lot happen. I could put it into an AI engine. I could use 1 or 2 of those fields. There's a ton that you can do with those 7 fields. They're universally useful across many industries.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. Because when we were doing deep data analysis for some of our clients, those were the 7 that were like, that's where you start, right? And beyond that gets into interest, propensity, all kinds of different things. But you have to start with those and then you can expand. So if you're on the client side, if you're launching emails, if you have access to that, then get that access and then come up with a plan about how you're going to use it and combine it, right? What if I'm 35 and living in Chicago versus 35 and living in Iowa or the Midwest or, whatever? Try and put together some connections and test it out and see what happens. If I know that I'm a male or I'm a female and I have and I can separate out different products for that audience, fantastic. You are ahead of 90% of the retailers that are out there. The leaps from that data to complexity are not as far as people conceive. Now, if you're going to start assembling emails at the time of send, yes, that's way down the road, but you have to cut your finger on the early stuff, on the easy stuff.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. 20 years ago, we were doing it with spreadsheets.
Oh, God,
and we did some great things, sometimes. Right? But we managed to do some great things. I mean, 6 years ago, we were doing this with like rocks and gravel. But now we went to spreadsheets, and the great things we were able to do, I think about it, I did a lot of work with travel and hospitality, and I learned a lot from that experience. But recognizing that, if you're promoting a trip to New York City for the holidays, lots of different people want to go to New York City, but they want to go for a lot of different reasons. And a 50-year-old married couple with a high income range will have a different, will engage with an email about a trip, travel to New York differently than a 25-year-old single professional would. Different imagery, different content, different reasons, different inventory to draw from. And that we know intuitively. And what we've been able to do from 20 years ago to now is we have great tools, great ways to use our automation engines and our data to do this at great scale. And it's super exciting. There's no better time to be part of this business as long as you're turning all this stuff on. So I think let's one of the things that I find super valuable, Ryan, that you've helped your clients with is helping them audit their first party data.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how often someone should audit. What does it look like to get started? What are going to be the near benefits? Like, what am I benefiting by really stopping this engine I'm on? We're all on this engine that won't stop, right?
Right.
And auditing.
So listen, when I have been on the retail side, I've been one pushing the button, right? And even with our clients, I encourage them, even if we don't do it, I encourage them to take a really close look at their entire program at least once a year. Look at all of their triggers, their promotional, their entry pages, their automate, all of the things, right? Look at them, document them, capture them. I wrote an article a couple months ago about how to do a self-audit. And we do audits for companies, but the whole goal is to make sure that you're aligned to your current brand standards and to your current customer, and that you're capturing the information that you need to be successful. But if you're doing a quick audit or a full audit once a year, that is the requirement as an email marketer to make sure you're off base. And I'll give you a perfect example. We're working with an extremely large retailer right now, and you would believe that if we walk in and they're buttoned up and they're humming along, but we're finding emails that haven't been updated in a long time, that are off brand, that maybe need some tweaks on their automation. And that's natural for companies, right? I've never done an audit where I haven't found something that's like, oh, you're going to make more money off of this. Your KPIs are going to increase because we're going to change some stuff. It's not about change for the sake of change. It's insights from a cross-vertical approach that takes me to that email and helps me to make it better. But companies, Phil, and I don't know what you see, but companies should be looking internally at least once a year. And if you hire a new person, they should be the one doing the audit.
Yeah.
Because they should be, they're not jaded and in the process, they're not biased.
Absolutely. And it is, so it's not just looking at your data, it's also looking at the content.
Yeah.
And what's automated. I always tell people, look closely at the white space in your welcome email or your purchase email. Like, are you using that white space intelligently?
Yes.
That's the first thing they get. It's the most opened email, right? So really get in and think about that white space and how you are, what can you do to make a better first impression? Because the better first impression you make, the more likely you are to get them to open the next email and to get a relationship and to get them to sign up for your loyalty program. And that's the end game, right?
It is. And we focus a lot on what I call the foundational elements of email, right? So your capture, right? Where on the website are they coming to? Your welcome email or onboarding, your promotional email as a template, your transactional email, the entire series and depth, and then your opt-out, your attrition steps, right? So do you have an opt-down or an opt-out, and what's that whole process look like, right? Within that, there's all kinds of nuance in acquisition. Are you capturing some extra pieces of information like we talked about before? In your attrition, are you asking people to opt down, which means reduce cadence or change the topic, right? Do you have a template that's consistent across? There's all kinds of different questions that you can ask, but within the foundational items, 9 times out of 10 in the companies we work with, we will find an optimization inside of those that will change their revenue goals and their projections.
Excellent. Well, I'm trying to manage our time a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about new things, the new shiny objects.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So from a tech, there's nothing shinier than tech. So what are some of the new things that maybe as you're talking to people, they're talking about, or they should be talking about, or maybe they should not be talking about? Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there.
You know what? The one I have the most conversations about, and I had one this morning, what the heck is a CDP? And how does it fit into my stack? How do I think about that when you talk about data lakes and CRMs, and now you got a CDP, and now you got an email system, and what is the consistent definition across everybody about what a CDP is. The other thing, and we saw this at EEC a little bit, Phil, was the chat GPT and artificial intelligence discussion, right? And it was on two sides. It was like, this is really cool, and there's a lot of promise, and there's a lot of things we can do. And then there were the other people that were like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my job. And to the people on the I'm gonna lose my job, I just wanted to go, no, you're not gonna lose your job. It's been surprising, the reaction to chat as our next overlords. And not to say there isn't some evidence of guardrails needing to be put on and some weird stuff, but the way I look at it is ChatGPT was born, what, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, whatever it was, came on the spotlight. It's still an infant. We still need to define what it is and how the at scale part of that actually happens. We haven't even determined pricing, use, any of that kind of stuff.
Sure. And you know, the nimbleness, and is it connecting with people?
Yes.
And you know, email, you know, doesn't just, it's not just about there's an emotional connection that you can
There
make,
is.
right? And so we did a series a little while ago about, you know, how do you use emotion in your emails? And you know the brands that do it well, but you know, we're just trying, you know, digital connection is really important to our consumers. And
Yeah.
you know, we have to meet people where they are. And so, you know, we don't even know what ChatGPT is able to do. I keep thinking about like AI, you know, the capabilities of AI engines that are built inside of our automation machines are massive, and we're only using a fraction of them.
Yes.
Right. And so the one thing I would say is we tend to use them too late in the relationship, right? We use them with our loyalty customers. What I would say is get those behavioral fields when you first acquire a customer, marry in those 7 holy grade fields and turn things on earlier.
Oh,
to
God,
me,
yeah.
that's the new shiny tech should be using the existing tech you have better.
Yes.
And so that's one thing. I think the CDP experience is super interesting. You know, is it going to make it easier to break down data silos so that more parts of your organization have access to data? You know, one of the things that I would say, you know, when we all started working from home for a while, there was a lot of data that you could pull from your CRM that helps inform different parts of your organization about your company's productivity and success. And I think the CDP, you know, as an organization, we should be looking to CDPs where they can help us break down data silos and be more efficient and effective in how all parts of the organization can use data.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought on CDPs from that perspective.
It is, and people are still trying to figure out what it looks like and how it interacts, and what is the differentiation between an ad hoc and an email that goes through a propensity laden model, right? And that sophistication. But a lot of people get, you know, if you're scared about personalization, you're going to be terrified at CDPs. But I think among all of these things that come up and some fade away, right? It's about, first, think about what is the impact to the consumer? How can I benefit that? Then how can I benefit my own messaging, my own mission, and my own direction? And then how do I incorporate it? How do I make it work in a process, in a flow, in an organization? And as you go through that, you're keeping that customer centricity at the front, because that's your benefit. That's how who you're trying to benefit, right? Is the end user. But don't get scared or that, you know, overreact to the shiny thing, right? ChatGPT at this point is the equivalent of Google Tabs. Now, it can and has the potential to grow into a massive thing, but let's pause a minute and let's think about how can it benefit our jobs and the end user, the consumer. Because there's a ton of stuff, especially when you layer on data, CDPs, CRM, all that stuff, your stack. When you look at the complexity of the landscape, there's a lot that we can do.
Yeah, I can't believe you just brought up Google Tabs. That's awesome. So, so the postscript on Google Tabs was years ago when Google put out some tabs and was moving things into promotional versus social versus your mobile. Email marketers were like, my campaigns are dead.
Lost their mind.
And you know, I saw it as an opportunity of it. Actually, as a consumer, I found it had great consumer value. It allowed a consumer to organize their emails in an automated fashion, find their promotional emails easier and better, and take action with their promotional emails without them, you know, being mixed in with their other things. And the postscript is tabs did not end the world for our email marketers. We learn, we adapt, and it made it better. So it's super interesting that you brought that up. I I think that's
I have a little
fascinating.
I have a little PTSD after tabs, because at the time I was at another company, and literally my phone was ringing off the hook from these huge companies, thinking just what you said, the world is going to end. Email is dead. We're all gone. And it's like, okay, still here. Apple MPP, right? Oh, the world is going to end. We're all going to die. We're all going to find another job. Still here. May not have opens, but we're still here.
I think it made us better marketers.
It
honestly.
did.
You know,
and it needed to.
Open rate is a vanity stat. And if we could focus more on revenue per email sent and really get down to that metric, it makes it makes everyone a better marketer. So we're technology is amazing. We're an adaptable crew. Why don't we take a few minutes for some questions, and then we'll try to wrap it up and get everyone back to their busy day.
Cool.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? We're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Just making sure my mic turned back on. One of the first questions that came through was marketing ebbs and flows, and the makeup of your current customer changes just as often. So how critical is a yearly audit to identify this? And how can you use a yearly audit to inform next year's strategy?
Oh, gosh. You're absolutely right that customers ebb and flow. When we run models or personas for different clients, we run refreshes to that on a fairly regular basis because of the transitory nature of the consumer, sometimes daily. In CDPs, you can run that in real time, right? When you do an audit, what you're doing is making sure that you have at least this moment in time reflected in the marketing, right? Think of the last 12 months. What has happened in that period of time. The audit, yes, it's a moment in time, and yes, you should be adapting any changes in demographic or customer flow throughout the year. But if you set a dedicated time to do an audit, you at least are caught up to that point. An audit should not replace checking in on a regular basis to all of your program, but it just gives you that moment in time to say, I'm going to dedicate time to this thing, right? And it does help inform what you have for the next 12 months, because you may learn something new about an email program or heard some thought leader talk about X, Y, and Z. You can kind of plan out your year. So we always encourage people to do it in the first quarter of the year, but really any time is fine.
Yeah, I think, Lizzie, the one thing I would say when brands say, gosh, my target audience shifts, sometimes brands do something with their marketing that shifts it, right?
Yes.
So the question is, how do I become great with all my different personas? Not how do I shift because there's been a shift of persona. Maybe I'm not as effective in one of the personas because of something I've done with my campaigns.
My messaging stuff. Yeah.
So the audit uncovers a lot of opportunities. And so, it goes back to my example. My email only works for young women. No, your practice is only speaking to young women. If you make a change, you have expanded your success across personas.
Yeah. I would totally agree, Phil.
Got you. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. It's hard when your personas either shift or don't shift. You have to figure it out.
I love Phil's point of sometimes you shifted them. Sometimes you broke it and you got to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I can think back to agency where that happened a couple of times.
Absolutely. And that's why regular audits help you identify that. Because if you wait too long, you don't recognize where you broke it. You just shift in a different direction.
And the one thing I would say, Phil, is along with an audit should be that data audit, right? We talked before about those 7 items that are crucial, right? When you do an audit, you also need to take a look at what data do you have available and what data do you need to go to your organization and ask for. Can I get X? Can I get Y? A lot of companies don't have limited information going into to the email system. So at the time you do an audit, it's the time to say, I could really do something with these 3 data points. Can I have them? And if they don't have them, can we go buy them? Can we go acquire them either through progressive profiling or a third party, whatever?
Yep.
You actually led right into my next question.
Oh, excellent.
So it actually worked out pretty well. So there was a question that said data is a pretty broad term and most marketers start with the key identifiers, last name, first name, email address. So to get those 7 demographic fields you mentioned previously, how do I get my hands on that information and then incorporate it into my strategy? A follow-up to that is, if you can't get your hands on those 7 demographic fields, what are the 1 or 2 key fields that you should get your hands on?
So I'll answer, because those 7 fields, again, I looked at across a lot of different verticals. Those 7 fields were uniquely useful for a number of things. They helped, they really provide content, contextualize the behavior, right? And so a couple ways to get them. Number one, like we offer that at AtData. We have access to that. So through a real-time API, every time you acquire an email address, you could call out for those specific fields. And it allows you to have consistency in your program, and it allows you to then, turn on the tools in your marketing automation machine. So from a tactical perspective, whether you could feed it into an AI engine and make something happen. Again, remember we talked about personalization, the continuum. At the very least, you could build probably a dozen plus different segments so that you could target in a better way. And so the low touch 20 years ago, spreadsheet, 20 segments. Today, and you throw it into an AI engine early on in the process that is already part of your automation machine, and you're better informed.
Yep. And I would totally agree with that, Phil. I think to the question, right? And I've written about this a lot over my career. Marketers as a whole, and this is me as well, right? We have a hard time with strategy and tactics. As marketers, we go instantly to tactics. I want to do this, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to get this done. What I always encourage people is that start with the strategy. What do I need to accomplish? Why does the customer care? What is the end result? What is the KPI? Answer that, and then let that drive what data you need. What method does it take? What the scale is? What the message is? But you starting by that strategic step ensures that you don't make mistakes down the road by getting off track or losing your way.
Yeah, well, and that strategy should probably be adaptable too, right? So leading into this next question, theoretically, in a down economy, email becomes a more viable channel due to its cost. So what should be your main focus or strategy for an email marketer to help move the revenue needle in that sort of down economy?
Mm-hmm.
Ron, you want to take it first? I got a lot of ideas. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So we used to always say that email was recession proof. And we really had the proof point that that was true, not during a recession, but during COVID, in that COVID survived, or email survived during COVID. Now, is email recession proof? Every recession looks at proving or disproving that. I think it is, because of its agility, which was proven in COVID. And that goes back to the marketers that were able to pivot, use their platform, use data to go out. If we're in a recession, then there's another thing that you have to add in. So you have to be fast, you have to be nimble, you have to pivot, you have to be authentic. But at this point, we have time to look at, am I maximizing each touch point with the consumer on my KPIs? Am I doing everything I can in my existing system? So are my templates right? Is my timing right? Do I need a third email on my abandoned cart? Do I need a browse? Look at those things that are easy for the email person to action early. And then it does become recession proof because you've maximized your channels that you have for touch. Phil, what do you think? What did I miss?
So I would be, during this 2023, like, what can I do for re-engagement? How do I do a much better job with my re-engagement, right? So understand, I learned a lot since some of my emails became unengaged, but which of those emails are safe to re-engage with? And it's something we help our clients identify. And then, use best practices now to re-engage with those folks. The other thing is make sure you got a great cart abandonment practice,
Yes.
right? And people are abandoning carts for different reasons. Don't assume they're just waiting for a 5% discount, right? You know, they, maybe they want, if you're in travel, reassurance that their bookings, that their booking can be canceled within 24 hours, right? Maybe, there's a lot of different messaging and different opportunities you could test, but you need to have the data behind it. But really think about cart abandonment. And then lastly, brands, it's hard, right? This is tough times, However, they're also like, it's kind of weird because I've never been in what felt like a downtime in a time of optimism at the same time. Like people are employed, wages are up. There's some really good things out there, but people are going through a lot. And so have empathy and find ways to show empathy. And to some degrees, having a better omni-channel approach during this time, which is, right, these are the people in my database. Am I connected across the channels? Am I able to give them the same, good experience across all those channels? And then having empathy, understanding, where your consumers are today is really important. Don't be tone deaf, I think is the point.
Yes. And we learned that in COVID, right?
Absolutely.
And just remember that. If you need to go back and read some of the articles that were written and how to do this, you just need to get back in touch with that, because we're going to need that same nimbleness and adaptivity in this time.
Mm-hmm. I've got one left for you guys, and you already alluded to it, Phil. You already started talking about it. So we have email as this primary channel. We're so used to using it. Talking about omni-channel, what do some of those other channels look like? How do we incorporate them into sort of this flawless omni-channel strategy that really just converts?
So I do think the most important thing is to have your data connected, right?
Yes.
Number one. So, is the digital and the MarTech, is the postal, right? Push notification, everything that's happening, all those things, are they coming up? Your app experience, your in-store experience, like do that, make sure it's connected. And then, I love click to brick example companies. They've done a great job, better than brick to click. But the click to brick, the Warby Parkers, the Bonoboses, they start every experience, you're logged in. Whether you go into their store, whether you're online, you're logged in to improve the service. But they don't just say log in to get better service. They then give you better service. Like, you got to do what you say you're going to do to make omnichannel really work. I know, Ryan, you've got a lot to say on this.
Here's what I would say. There's a difference between omnichannel and connected or coordinated, right? Coordinated is, I like to say, the poor man's way of thinking we're doing omnichannel. Group of marketers sit around a room, everybody's got a thematic, right? Here's what we're gonna, and we see this a lot in Christmas. Okay, here's our theme, here's our picture of our consumer. Now email, go deliver something that looks like this, and text, go do this, and it's not connected, it's not omni-channel, it's coordinated. I got one message and I'm just gonna propagate it through all my channels. When you start talking about omni-channel, you're looking at channel propensity. Where do people convert and react? You're looking at models that actually change the nature of the message based upon who you are and what model you sit in. There are excluded models of people that we know will never react, but we're going to try anyway, but we're going to try in this channel or that channel, or we're going to try with direct mail even, right? When you talk about omni-channel, you're talking about data sophistication at scale. And you're talking about choices in messaging that are based in that data and the extrapolation of that data to models and propensity and cohorts and all those different things, right? And so that is the summit of what we can do. But in order for you or any company to get to omnichannel, you've got to go through this journey, and that journey is starting with the one thing or the two things and building upon that, getting smarter, testing things, building your data inventory and the fluidity of how you use data in your campaigns, and getting to that point. You don't go from I just do first name to I'm doing an omni-channel strategy in 6 months. You can,
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money, and you should call me because I'll take it. But that's not how this world works.
Well, and I think Ryan, a really interesting distinction is between a coordinated channel effort and an
Yeah.
omni-channel effort. I think that the real difference from the way it looks like from a customer is it considers the customer journey and empowers the
Yes.
customer at each stage of the journey, no matter where they are and how
Yes.
they're connecting to the brand. And a coordinated effort doesn't consider the journey. It's just, it's a message.
It's just a blast.
Exactly. So I think, you know, and we're better marketers when we consider the customer journey.
Yep.
All right, well, that's all I've got for questions today. So thank you both. This is a great way to kick off our Fireside Chats for the year. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really am honored to be here. Phil and I have known each other for so long, and just very humbled to be asked to do this. And thank you very much for inviting me.
And thanks for joining us. It was a lot of fun to, you know, prepare with you and to share with our marketing friends.
There we go.
So we really appreciate everyone who took the time. Have a fantastic time. If you need anything from either of us, and we could put you in touch with each other, so it's whoever you go to will help you out. And have a fantastic day.